Hey everyone, it's Terrence Branley back here with the Grow IT Partner Podcast. And today I have Philip Parker, who is the Managing Director of Holland Parker. And I'm really looking forward to, we've had a few conversations, Philip, and I'm really looking forward to having one specific to Holland Parker and your offering.
Yeah, appreciate it, Terrence. Thank you for having me on the podcast today. And I look forward to talking with you as well and talk about current market landscape, but also about a little bit about Holland Parker and our offering and what we do.
Great. Well, I'll tell you what, why don't you start off by just telling me about your background and really your entrepreneurial journey.
Sure. So my name is Philip Parker. I'm the Managing Director and owner of Holland Parker. We're a software implementation consulting firm based out of Houston, Texas. Pretty much spent my entire career in the consulting world in a variety of technology backgrounds, but I've spent predominantly spent in the finance and accounting space and implementing software solutions, as I like to say it, to help finance and accounting with the daily grind of what they do on a day-to-day basis. So to take them and elevate them out of, let's say, Excel or any other tool they may use in their toolkit to a more centralized software platform that they can gain analysis from, but also do their financial reporting as well as submitting their financial results to, let's say, or organizations like the SEC or government institutions.
So is your core offer, obviously it's specific to, the finance and accounting, vertical. Is your core offering kind of helping them with develop, maybe stuff, software, programs or offerings that bring them from the Excel, Microsoft, spreadsheet world over into some, process automation, or what would you consider?
Yeah. So we kind of think of it as taking them out of Excel, although they can use Excel to pull numbers in from these systems and make them more organized, right? So that they have a repository to be able to access to see their historical information, also forward-looking, their forecast as well. And now we're starting to get into more artificial intelligence as well as machine learning around how can we automate, again, just like their 5-year forecast or their 18-month rolling forecast, or how can we automate their consolidation and close process through the use of technology. We don't necessarily write software programs, but we take software programs that we kind of hand selected or I've gone through, say in the finance and accounting world and the software we work with, let's say there's 50 competitors. I've chosen one out of the 50 to partner with because I feel with my technology background that I can, go through the pros and cons of it and find the best fit for that company, right? And then what we do is we take that best-in-class product and then elevate it by implementing it to based on their business processes.
So what are some of the problems, challenges that your clients are whether it's prospects or clients that are facing, or where are they trying to get to? Like when they come to you and get you guys involved, are they looking to streamline processes? You had mentioned, automate portions of processes. So are they trying to make their businesses more efficient, more cost effective? What are some of their internal pain points that you're coming to them to help with?
Yeah, typically it's to make their business more efficient. So a lot of these companies are very complex, usually publicly traded companies that not only are they complex, but they also have reporting requirements for the various government entities in the world. And so a lot of companies that we work with have worldwide operations. And when you kind of unravel their financials, it's not just as simple as, well, we book some expenses in U.S. currency. So some clients we have 35 currencies. They have 35 tax entities that they have to report to, and they also have to report to the SEC on a timely manner. Their reporting requirements are not, hey, we'll get to it when we want to. It's they're mandated to be able to provide quarterly and yearly financials that are audited, and they can in the background see who is actually making changes and things like that. So a company that, for instance, a large company that does a lot of mergers and acquisitions, they're looking at in our software, or once we implement it, they're looking at, well, what happens if we acquire a company? How does that change our business, right? How does it add to our revenue? What expenses do they have? Do they have any debt? And be able to model that out within the software to see whether or not maybe they want to acquire or potentially divest a company that's maybe performing a little, performing not as expected, and they want to sell that company off, right? So that's just one example, but it could also be a company that is starting to go through their growth cycle where they've outgrown Excel, right? Or they're coming from a technology that maybe they've been on for the past 10 or so years, and they want to get on a new platform or whatnot to be more efficient, right? We're not necessarily changing how they make a product. For instance, if it's a manufacturing company, how they actually produce that product. What we're doing is giving them visibility on how much that product's actually costing them to produce and how much they're actually selling and what areas that they're selling it in, and then all the other corporate aspects to that, their assets and liabilities, how much debt they're carrying, what their debt notes, when they're maturing, so that they can take action on that as well. So it goes from like auditing and reporting to actually actions and insights, right? Or insights to actions, right? So I can see something, I can make a decision on it without having to have 15 analysts figure out how to merge all that data together and present it to their CFOs or vice presidents of the company.
So complexity and compliance are probably, a couple of the drivers of those pain points, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You mentioned, you mentioned an example of a larger company there. And one of the things that I'd love to, ask people is, tell me about some success stories, right? I mean, people love success stories. Success can be driven, both by, hey, we achieved this, but sometimes it can be from making processes more efficient, more effective. It can be whatever their desired outcomes, but maybe if you can kind of talk about a few different success stories that clients have had with your firm.
Yeah, I would say that as a company, we define success as one, doing the implementation, that the implementation goes well. But what I tell my clients is that I'm here to make y'all experts in the solution that we're implementing. I'm not here to make it so complicated that you rely on us to make sure that these models can get updated and things like that. So a big portion of that is training our customers to be self-sufficient in the software that we implement, and the change management that goes around that. So one of our clients, large manufacturing company based in Chicago, they took on what we call a strategy and roadmap. So these are basically, instead of we're not yet ready to implement the software, we're going to take a step back, and we're going to actually, and in this case, we traveled the world and met with their operating companies to discuss what their processes were today, what they would like to see in the future, and how technology is going to fit and fill that gap, right? And then also, how are they going to be trained up on this? How are they going to get exposure to it? So it's not like, again, it's a little more complicated than just having, pushing out Excel and letting the icon show up on their computers. It's actually taking their business process, mapping it to the technology. And I feel like since I started the company in 2012, that's something we take a lot of pride in, is being able to map the business to the technology in a way that it's easy to understand for themselves.
No, I was just going to say, two obviously the most important parts of business are the people and processes, right? And sometimes, firms can, get involved in, hey, we're going to improve the process. But if you don't address the people side, right, the change management, things of that nature, you're not fixing both sides of the equation. Would you agree?
Right. So a big piece, a lot of what people think is I can buy software, even as desktop software that we may buy just for our personal use, mm-hmm. right? Is that it's going to fix the immediate problem. Like I'm going to install it and let it go, and I never have to look at it again, and it just works. And so there's a degree of that, like it does, the functionality does work, but if people aren't trained on it, they usually revert back to what they're comfortable with. So what they're most likely comfortable with is Excel. And so instead of utilizing the software and the power of the software, they're extracting the data out using Excel, and they didn't really change and make the business more efficient from analyzing their business and to be able to make business decisions on. So going for a case in point to the company that we're working with now again, I'm kind of giving you the journey of this company and where they're going. Is we outlined a roadmap that is a multi-phase roadmap that gets everybody comfortable with, but with what we're about to implement, but also got buy-in from the people that are going to be using the software. So it starts that change management journey. And throughout that, we're going to have checkpoints in there, but also we'll have during, let's say, testing and things like that, more training on top of that to get them used to the software and incorporate that. So I think it is a huge piece of the implementation world. And candidly, it's probably the biggest piece that most people go, well, we don't really need that. We know our processes. Can you just get the software in? Because we're usually trying to solve some pain point that is the reason why they bought the software in the first place, right? And so, again, we have structured the business to be able to we have a training division, we have a strategy division, we have an implementation services division, and all those work as teams to ensure the success of the project.
Yeah. One of the things that still fascinates me to this day is that Excel worksheets is still such a big part of businesses, right? I mean, when I came into the business world a long time ago, they were the mainstay. That was all we really had, right? I mean, software was pretty non-existent other than, the larger Microsofts. And to see it still to this day heavily involved in business with all the powerful software, platforms that are available is quite amazing.
Yeah, no, that's true. Well, if you're starting, I mean, even when I say a startup, let's say it's a $100 million startup, still in its infancy, it's still a big company, but to me, it's a big company, but Excel's relatively cheap. Everybody knows Excel. It's very easy to learn. And then what happens is the models start exploding, right? So as we grow, you start adding more and more. There's turnover in the company. People don't understand the models that were built. They create their own model. And then now there's a term, a kind of industry term. They'll say they're in Excel hell, right? All these worksheets, are the numbers right? Are they not? Now we're being audited. Where these numbers come from? Who changed what? Well, you're not tracking any of that stuff. And that's what the solutions, once implemented, tracks that down to a user and cell level to say this number was changed on this date. And so that the auditors, it becomes an auditor's dream, right? Because they can see very clearly how something was modified if you need to scrutinize the numbers in that manner. So a lot of times in the forecasting world, so we do a lot of forecasting and planning and budgeting. So very similar to somebody doing some sort of budgeting software at a personal level, budgeting just my normal expenses. We do that at a corporate level. You may have 150, 200 people go in and put in their budgets, but they're not really looking at it to an nth degree, the auditability of that, because it could change. It could change from a machine learning model. It could change from AI looking at it now. It could change from a human factor. What they're looking at is like, why are the swings in here? You're budgeting that we're going to make $500 million this year. Where is that coming from? And they can drill down in it and say, oh, well, product A has, a $3 billion backlog. And so we think it's going to hit at these times, and be able to analyze it in that method. Just a different type of way to analyze the numbers, but again, doesn't have the same, I don't say restrictions, but need for that audit capability to know who exactly changed those numbers, right?
Yeah. You talked about obviously AI and LLM, and one of the questions I always ask folks is just what kind of trends that they see coming down the pipe, and now I just might as well change the question to how you view AI and LLMs impacting businesses, and one of the things that I've found interesting is that there's been a lot of talk in that the finance and accounting world is where they feel that that AI will make the most impact. Now, whatever that means, whether it means making more efficient, whether it means eliminating job responsibility, whatever it may be, I don't know. But I guess my question to you is, how do you see, right? So you're serving those financial sectors and accounting, and you see the complexity and compliance issues. Where do you see AI and LLMs getting involved in helping to make things more streamlined?
So right now it's about everybody wants it to do everything, right? It's in that mode, in my opinion. We haven't really narrowed down in our field exactly how it's going to benefit the accounting and finance world. This is just my opinion. Again, there's models built. There's many different finance and accounting practices, right? You could say a fund accounting manager does finance and accounting, but we're talking about like corporate accounting and corporate finance. What I kind of like to take a step back from AI and ML, and for us to go back 10 years or even 15 years and look at the disruption that like companies like UiPath created in the market. And that they thought that was just going to, revolutionize accounting and finance. By UiPath, they create, it's basically robotics, right? I say robot, it's not really a robot, it's a technical robot on your desktop to be able to do like accounts payable transactions and things. So a check comes in or a check goes out, and the desktop tool is actually doing it. It looks and scans a check, it sees the amount, maybe it posts a journal to the general ledger, or it creates an invoice to send out based on work, right? And so that was automated. And again, when they first came out, it was like, we're going to use this for every single task within an organization, and everybody will use it. Well, it kind of found its niche, and they capitalized on it. Now you don't even hear about those in my field. We don't hear about those companies anymore. We really are hearing about AI and ML companies all trying to do this kind of land grab of where is it going to fit. In my opinion, where I think it could benefit, I think auditing, like auditing financials, whether it's external or internal, and being able to go through, because the data sets are growing. And so what I see is, as the data sets grew, it takes more and more humans to analyze the data set to see, is it within certain thresholds, right? Is it in compliance? Is it not in compliance? And things like that. Well, machines can do that at much faster pace than we can. So something like auditing, something like, for instance, the audits that I was telling you about, or mentioning earlier about going in and seeing who's actually accessing the system and all that stuff. Well, again, as users are using these larger systems and getting out, not necessarily out of Excel, but using it as their modeling tool, there's more data that's generated to go find all this stuff. So using ML and AI for that, I think it will also be commonplace for finance and forecasting and budgeting tools to be able to forecast out in a very automated fashion. Like, hey, run this process. I'm going to show you 10 different scenarios. It was all based on, some were based on weather, some were based on historicals, some were based on some other variant that have been dreamed up in those type of models. Maybe they're shared models, and pick or choose which one you think is going to be more realistic, because it still takes a human to go in and look at it and say, hey, that blip that you're seeing, that wasn't real. AI and ML they have no comprehension of what COVID did to the economy. That it's just not even, it knows, I mean, it can look at it and say that it was some sort of anomaly, maybe, because they didn't see it 20 years ago. But if you take imagine today a 3-year-old company, well, what are you analyzing there? Because 2 years ago, we were kind of coming out of COVID. So were your numbers bad because you were, or not bad, but were they less than what you thought because it was COVID? Was it less than what you thought because you're just a growing company? Or was it because it was a snowy day outside? You know what I mean? So those types of things, there's only so far that it can take you. And they're getting more and more sophisticated. So even what I'm saying today, maybe tomorrow it's completely solved, but I still think that there's a human aspect to it.
I do too. And I asked this question obviously to a lot of folks that I speak with, and everyone kind of has the same reaction. That we're kind of in this wild west in terms of not knowing where it's going to go, but B, everyone consistently says the same thing, and that is, AI is going to be able to get you 60 to 80% of the way there, right? And even if you just want to use the Pareto rule as an 80-20 and say, hey, it's going to get you to 80% of the way there, that's huge, right? That's huge in itself, but it's not going to eliminate the need for human specialty to come in and make those determinations, right? Is this an aberration? Was this a one-time thing? If we're inputting multiple sets of data, should we weight data differently in terms of what it is? But it's always going to involve a human that can assess it and look and say, oh, here, this may or not be included in it. But that is one constant. And I wonder if you feel the same.
Yeah, I think the what we're hoping is that people are making decisions off of the data faster than what they could to prior to that. Instead of becoming data aggregators, they become, and modeling people that model data, but they actually can make decisions off that data at a faster pace. So think about like hiring somebody to find a needle in a haystack, right? A computer can do that much faster, candidly, than a human could. But that's in corporate America. We have a lot of people that are trying to look for that needle in a haystack. So find the anomalies, tell me what the anomalies are, and let me pick or choose how that should affect our business, so I can roll that up to my management team to make decisions on that, right? I don't know. I mean, I candidly don't really know how to use. I mean, I know how to use Excel. I can program Excel from my background and the things I've done. But when you go in and see how finance and accounting uses it, they don't use it from a programming. They use all these functions and all this other stuff. It's like get away from doing all that stuff. Let the computers do it. These systems do it for you. And then now let's go to the decision-making process, because usually that's 30 minutes of their day, and the rest of the day is just getting all the data, sifting through all the data, and trying to figure out how to make sense of the data.
Yeah. And I've used this example. We, in one of my other businesses, we implemented an open source ERP, and as a complete non-coder, tech guy in terms of that stuff goes, as ChatGPT started exploding last year, I was in the process of trying to work with our developer to implement certain business processes into our ERP. And I used it in one case to go into ChatGPT and say, hey, I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to link our accounting piece with our manufacturing piece, and I'm trying to get it to do X, Y, and Z. Can you code this and show me what it should look like? And sure enough, it spit back. Now, granted, I'm not a developer that I can look through the code to see it was accurate, but I imagine it probably got it 70 or 80% right. Yeah. And I would imagine that's where, in your example, right, so the functionality of Excel and those type of sheets, right, that someone has, someone that may not be as adept as creating that functionality, but understands what they're trying to get out of the data, AI and LLMs will help them be able to do that without having to become an Excel expert, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. Right. And when ChatGPT came out, probably last year, the year before, I had a couple of guys do exactly that. So they were doing something in Excel. They had a macro that they had built. They were trying to debug it. They took it, pasted it in ChatGPT. It fixed it for them. Then they're like, okay, well, that was kind of cool, but let's see what happens if I actually just type in, I'm trying to create a macro to do this, and all of a sudden it just created it. So look, we're it's like, the first days, but my understanding is that the folks behind OpenAI had been working on it for 10 or 12 years before they ever, I mean, that's a lot of that. Yeah. It's not like it came out yesterday. It's been around for, at least internally or whatnot, for quite some time. But kind of think about what the first Teslas were like and what their miles per gallon. That's probably, I don't know why we still use miles per gallon, but because
especially with a Tesla, because I don't think there is any gallons.
But, they try to make that equivalent. It's like 250 miles per gallon. Well, now we have them that can do 400 miles per gallon. It's getting better and better. Well, it's in a society that's so consumer driven, and we want it now. We want to see that's why ChatGPT's numbers went through the roof, because everybody was so excited about it. Then you got in there and go, well, some college kid just got, expelled from school because they created a paper using ChatGPT. They said, I heard, and again, this is hearsay, but I heard that there were more utilities created in the shortest time span ever to do fact checks on ChatGPT responses, because it was being used so heavily. Teachers were like, I don't know what to do. I can't even tell. They actually look pretty good, but is this? And so there are LLMs out there where you can paste it in there and it'll be like, yep, this one came from, ChatGPT. This one came from this one. This one came from this one. So they can do some sort of copyright on it and kind of nix that problem faster than I've ever seen it, right? Because, I mean, that existed even when I was in college. Mm-hmm. People would, we were writing code and somebody would be like, hey, can I get a little snippet from it? And all of a sudden you're like, use the entire program. You can't do that, or else I am going to get expelled from school,
It is fascinating. I had the conversation. I sent my son off to college this year and said, listen, leverage it, but leverage it to get you, from 0 to 60 or 80%, but don't rely on it to do your work for you. Right. I mean, if you need help, it definitely is there in terms of ChatGPT to be able to get you from square zero to concept in your head to, something that you can start working with. But
Right. So go ahead, like circling back to where businesses are starting to look at this, the cloud adoption took 20 years. Like Salesforce, some of those older cloud first companies like Salesforce have been around for a long time. Again, they didn't start up 5 years ago, right? It wasn't a push. They were like, we're going to build this sales CRM platform, and it's going to be the best thing. And look at them now. Look at them today. But finance and accounting is very timid right now about where that data goes to, right? So it took them a long time to even use cloud finance tools, and it is a data safeguarded. So now we're getting to that comfort point. But now to have something start analyzing it, well, what are they using that analysis for? Can they use it externally? So now you're seeing private LLMs being created and then giving the reassurance. But then that kind of goes against, using cloud platforms and things. So if you have to run it internally, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of discrepancies around that. So, corporate world moves at a way slower pace than consumer world, but yet it's consumers that are running corporations, right? So they're like, oh, I see it on my iPhone, my Android phone. I want to use this tomorrow. I don't know if you remember when iPads came around, but everybody thought, we're getting rid of laptops. iPads are the next thing. And every executive wanted an iPad. And IT companies were like, absolutely not. Like, we can't control them. We don't have the things. And Apple, it took some time, but Apple got to the point where they put in a lot of the controls IT was asking for. The just a fingerprint reader, the passcode and things like that. That wasn't on the iPhone 1.0, right? That took some time. And so they finally get comfortable with it, and you start seeing it. So I feel like, again, I don't have a crystal ball, but 5 years out, 8 years out before you really start seeing an adoption of it.
Gotcha.
Any company in Silicon Valley, they'll use it tomorrow. Like, that's just their nature.
Early adopters.
Right? Early adopters. But our banks, our educational institution, government, very slow to adopt that type of technology.
Yep. Well, let me ask you this. Back to Holland Parker. Let's talk about your value proposition, right? You're not the only firm that's probably out there in the marketplace, and maybe if you can talk about what you see as the most significant value proposition that you can bring to businesses, that you guys bring to your client base.
Yeah, I mean, candidly, it's evolved over the 12 years I've owned Holland Parker. Like I said, I came from a consulting background. When I got into the business, I was still doing consulting work. And so at that time, it was when I was a one employee, it was do the best work for my clients, right? And make sure that whatever I deliver can be used and, actually works and things like that. And I guess as we've grown as a company, and added multiple software products to our portfolio, but also added multiple divisions, like I mentioned, the strategy and roadmap services and things that value propositions change over time. And so now, again, kind of looking forward, we as a firm are really good at bridging the gap between business and technology, but we're also really, in my opinion, really good at finding the best technology that's going to suit the business. And it's not to say that we don't do ERP implementations, and there are manufacturing-esque ERPs as well as maybe one for banking or something like that. Ours isn't really necessarily industry specific, and they don't have a lot of industry tools in them. We're actually building it out to kind of match that industry. And so what I like to say is, what I want is the users of the system, and usually whether it's, the analysts all the way up to the vice presidents of finance or CFOs, that I want them to be able to build their career off of this implementation, right? And that it makes the company more efficient, it makes them more efficient, they can make better decisions off it. But, if they decide to go somewhere else, they have the success of that to be able to fall back on and say, well, if I did it there, I'm going to use Holland Parker here to implement something very similar and be able to trust that throughout. And so we have, over the years, put in, or not really, I say put in, but our core values have probably added to our core values. But it, as I said, starting out as an employee of one, it was making sure our projects go really, really well. And, not that we don't have road bumps, but is how we handle those road bumps, how we adjust to them and make sure that the project is successful and that they actually utilize the software, right? The software we implement isn't isn't as cheap as Excel, right? It's relatively expensive, or not, or,
there's an investment that's made.
There's an investment there, and we want the client to utilize the investment more so to, again, see their success, but also potentially maybe even do further investment in it and do make other areas of the business more efficient by extending the software to those guys as well.
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned being, Army of One back in 2012 when you started Holland Parker, and obviously where you're at today is a tremendously different place, right? What are some of the, growth challenges that you are experiencing, as you, continue to grow your firm?
One, consulting is not for everybody. And there's a lot of people that want to try to get into consulting as the software that we work with starts growing, right? If it starts becoming a larger market and things like that. And so, finding folks that want to, again, I've just been a career consultant. I mean, even in my college years. And so it's very natural to me, but I don't fit the industry mold, and so I look for folks that are ready to kind of embark upon it, but understand that it's not for everybody. So sometimes if they come and try to grow as a consultant, they're like, yeah, maybe the travel's too much, or maybe the type of work we do is too much. Our what we look for, and again, goes to, it's just hard, it's hard to find people, folks like this, is our job, in my opinion, is that Pareto rule you just mentioned, 80-20. It's 80% customer service and 20% technology. Technology is going to change. It's always going to change. What we're here to do is build relationships with our clients, build relationships with our internal folks, and make sure that we do and implement whatever we're implementing to the best of our capabilities, right? And that in itself poses everyday challenges, to stick with that, candidly. So as we've grown, I do a lot of things that I think are probably non-traditional in business books that tell you, you should be growing at a certain clip at every year. And if you're not, you're going to fail and this and this and this. And it's to, you got to take some of the business books that you read and the things on the internet to with a grain of salt and kind of make your own decisions off of it, right? Don't let it drive your decisions. Allow it to make it a more informed decision about where you're headed. I think just kind of talking outside of the software world, like especially for folks that are starting up their own business, is one, it's just taking the steps, the biggest leap, right? But there are headwinds on everything you read. Everything tells you you're not going to make it. Statistics, the world, your parents,
your competitors, everybody.
Yeah. Your competitors don't want, and you got to put that aside and just say that's all noise, and you're not going to be a statistic, right? It's not going to say, I think the quotes of, and again, I'm not the best at memorizing quotes, but like we've heard of like Thomas Edison, trying 1,000 times and coming up with one success, right? And that's played out over history. There's many people that have said that, but if you're not willing to fail, then you're never going to succeed. You have to fail to succeed, which it never really resonated, but now owning the business for 12 years, I'm like, I fail every day. It's just happenstance that I may have one success out of that, but I'm going to keep trying to get there, right? And but that's just a natural part, and you have to get comfortable with that. In my opinion,
I 100% agree with you. And again, I think part of our society, especially with social media, is you're constantly surrounded by, hearing what or seeing what you think is real, and that is that business ownership and being in the business world is just, it's all easy and everyone's a success and, everyone's, going on private jets, but that isn't the case. That, it is a grind. There are days that are good. There are days that are bad. There are things that we screw up as business owners. And I think it goes back to what you had kind of mentioned just a few minutes ago. And that is, the service component, right? And we're all humans. We're all trying to help each other get better. And when we have client partners that we're working with, right, there's not going to be catastrophic, mistakes, but the service component is where it comes into it, which is, hey, there's going to be a bumpy road. There is no roadmap that shows you to get from point A to point B direct, right? It's a little bit of a spaghetti, right? But we're with you and we're going to get you there. And I think that's where that 80% of the service focus will come into. You will you almost, it's almost impossible to succeed if you have that approach.
Right. And again, it's almost impossible not to, but again, if you see that a fork in the road and, maybe you're going down the wrong path, is to adjust to the path and get back on it. But to your point, keeping those core values, like I always lean back on those. And I think it's carried us through COVID. I tell the guys we hire that are straight out of college or maybe a couple of years out, I'm like, y'all haven't experienced what internet down, the .com bust did, or what the oil and gas crisis of 2015 caused, or, the financial crisis of 2008, or what COVID did, right? And those are kind of my four, amongst the other stuff that goes on where, software company doesn't grow as much, or, and we made a shift from one software to another software, which that had nothing to do with the economy, right? And so it's all the, how you keep with your core values, and again, eventually it will come out, or hopefully come out on the end. Yeah. But it's interesting because that's what my brain always preps for, is like, well, we haven't had another, economic downturn, stock market decline, or whatever in 5 years. Like, we're due. Like, when's this going to happen?
We need to start knocking on wood here.
Right. When's the next Enron going to happen? Because it's still happening. Yeah. There's a short essay book on. It's like probably 50 pages, but it's on like the five or six financial crises dated back to the tulip days of Amsterdam and the Netherlands. And it's interesting because what they're talking about is like how quickly we forget, how quickly we don't remember that, and we tend to repeat the exact same problem over and over and over. And what I like is that it talks about how tulips were thought of as gold back then, used as currency. People would, collect them and hoard them and this and that, and go to stocks, and it's the same thing. It's exact, and then there's something that somebody does that causes it to, or many people do, that causes it to collapse on itself, but yeah, it's just history.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's what I was just going to say too, the old saying of history repeats itself. And I constantly am reminding myself, and I know, before we started the show, we were talking about, history books that you were reading, and it's just, we're humans, we're hardwired, and it's inevitable that we're going to make probably some of the similar mistakes that the same humans did, multi generations ago. So it's
We're
human nature, right?
Yeah. We're also inherently probably greedy is probably a strong word, but it comes out. Especially in, multiplying revenue and how you're going to grow. And that's all, if you just say, well, I just want to be a 5-person employee, 5-person company, and this is what I want to do, and I never want to make any more money. Well, you're going against every norm that's in every business book written, Mm-hmm. So, but that goes back to make your own decisions. Some folks want to be a 3 to 5 man firm, and they do great, and they don't look back. Yeah.
What do you enjoy? What do you enjoy most about what you do? I know it's kind of a broad question, but like if you're to sit and think about it, like what is it that what is it that drives you? What is it that really that you enjoy about what you do?
So prior to really, so for years, even as we were growing, I was still doing consulting work, and I love the change in the pace. So not the change of pace, but the change of every project is different. I get to meet new people. I get to start over sometimes and kind of start with ground one. And so I call it like I get to start over with my introduction. So the more times I'm saying, hi, my name's Philip, I own Holland Parker, it's like I get to start over a new story. I think as I've grown, or we've grown, and I've done less and less consulting work, more growing the business and selling work, et cetera, is nurturing, and training folks is just the passion around that. One of the thing that drives me is I want to look back when I'm retired. Hopefully one day I can retire. Is go that was the best run of my career, right? And I want to implement things to make it the people that work for me the best run of their careers. Even if they work for me, I tell folks when I hire them, even if you work for me, if it's not realistic for me to think that you're going to work here for 40 years, I'd love you to work here for 30 or 40 years, but I'm probably not going to be here for 40 years. But if you were here for 3 years, when you retire, imagine that, like you have somebody starting their career, they work here for 3 or 4 years, and when they retire in 40 years or so, they look back and go, man, the best time I had was when I was working at Holland Parker. That's what I try to live day to day, you know. And again, I'm not perfect, but I try, and I try to implement those things to make it a fun place to work. Is not the term. That's a very misused term in my opinion, but a place that provides me daily challenges, a place that, you know, I have a great team of people to be able to help us through any problem that we may have, and that we work together as a team to get through those problems, right? And, you know, it does help to have some sort of salary on the side. I mean, for anybody, that goes hand in hand with it, but that's not the driving force behind it.
Yeah. And, you know, it's interesting, you were talking through that, and I was in my head thinking of some, you know, my past experiences, and I could think of a couple and the word that was coming to my head was impactful, right? So, you know, that seems to be what you're, you know, conveying, is that, you know, if you can be a place where both for your clients and for your employees, be in a place that is impactful on their career, that can be a big driver. And that's going to stick with me from our conversation today.
Yeah, no, that's a good word for it. I like the, I need to talk to you more about, you know, okay, I say it in, you know, 2 or 3 minutes, and then you could shorten it with one word.
That's what us marketing guys do. We try and find ways to condense things down to impactful type of statements.
Right.
Yeah.
I like it.
Well, listen, as we wrap up here, Philip, I want to be able to make sure that people can track you guys down, whether it's, you know, prospects or potential clients, or even folks that maybe have, you know, been inspired by our conversation and would like to talk to you about coming to work at Holland Parker. Where are some, you know, ways that they can get a hold of you, either on LinkedIn or your website? Where can they follow you?
Yeah, so anybody can reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's just Philip Parker. If you looked up Philip Parker and Holland Parker is the company. They could also see our company page through LinkedIn if you just looked up Holland Parker in LinkedIn. Also, our domain is hollandparker.com. I like to joke that one day maybe I can buy hp.com, but that's a much larger company than us. But and feel free to email me directly as philip.parker@hollandparker.com, and I'd be happy to talk with anybody, whether it's general business or even, again, the software and solutions that we provide as well.
Great. Well, I'll make sure and include all the links, you know, here as well, to make it easier for folks to just click rather than to write or type something down. But okay. I've greatly appreciated the time that you've given me today. I've really enjoyed our conversation, Philip. I hope you'll come back and we'll do this again.
Will do. I appreciate it, Terrence. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Philip. Thank you so much.
You too.